Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai, and today we're going to be styling my gold crest cypress, or also known as the Cypressus macrocarpa. Alright, so this is the cypress that we're going to be working on in this video today. This is known as the gold crest cypress, lemon cypress, Monterey cypress, or sort of the official name of it is the Cypressus macrocarpa. And as you work on this tree, even if you just squeeze the foliage, give it a smell, it has sort of this lemony, zesty, citrusy aroma to it, which I think smells pretty beautiful. It's probably one of my favorite trees to work on and just enjoy the smell of it. When I first got this tree, it didn't look quite like this. This one is sort of more on its way to becoming a nice bonsai now. As a species, they are really easily accessible, pretty easy to find in garden centers, and also relatively cheap, so they are great for beginners to bonsai. But when I first found this one, it was sort of just this long triangular shape. And it's just that average tree that you would see sitting in someone's garden. But just personally, I think they make excellent trees for bonsai. They've got this lovely, vibrant lime green color of foliage to it. And even some varieties from this same genus have more of a bright yellow vibe to them. And again, the same way with a juniper, if you look at the younger foliage further in, it has a little bit of a spiky nature to it. This would be known as the juvenile growth. At the end, where it's more cord-like, this would be the adult foliage. And before we start, the tools that we'll be using in this video today are some twig cutters, branch cutters, knob cutters, a pair of tweezers, wire cutters, and some Jin pliers. And as always, if you're just getting started in bonsai, by no means do you need all of these specialized bonsai tools. You can get by with just an ordinary pair of garden scissors or some cheap secateurs, just whatever you have at your disposal to get a particular job done. But whatever tool that you are using, you just want to make sure that it is clean and sharp. Clean so we don't introduce any bacterial or fungal infections to our tree, and sharp because a sharp blade will give you a much cleaner cut, and in horticulture, sharp cuts will heal so much faster and more efficiently than a blunt cut that was squashed by a dull blade. So just starting off at the base of this tree, I'm just going to take out these little fertilizer pellets while I go along here, and all I want to do is just remove all these little weeds in the pot. I'd rather deal with them now before they get big and then out of control, and I would recommend with the gold crest cypress. As you can see here, I have this in a really fast draining soil. This is a mix of pumice, akadama, and lava rock. And the akadama in this has been semi-fired, which means it won't break down as quickly as regular akadama. And you want the soil to be fast draining like this so that it can pull lots of oxygen down through the pot with each and every watering, and that way your tree will just thrive. And when it comes to repotting this species, I would recommend repotting in early spring. With younger trees, you want to repot every 2 to 3 years. And then with much older trees, like this one here, I would repot every 4 to 5 years. And of course, this all depends on the health of the tree. How quickly is it growing? How quickly are the roots filling the pot? If you notice the roots are filling the pot a lot quicker, even with older trees like this, then you may need to repot more often. There aren't really any hard and fast rules on a specific species and age of a tree. It all depends on how vigorous your particular tree is. If it is your first time doing styling on one of these trees, it may not look like this tree at all. This one only has a bare portion on the bottom half of the trunk because we're doing a second styling on this tree today. And whenever I first worked on this tree, I left more or less no foliage on it. I kept a little bit, maybe that much, on the tree whenever I first pruned it back pretty heavily. And with proper aftercare and fertilization, as you can see, the tree has recovered pretty well. But just to beginners out there, if you find this particular type of tree in a garden center, it will more than likely look sort of like a big cone in a pot. Just like most bonsais, with this one, I'm going to work my way from the base to the top of the tree. Here, as you can see, there is this deadwood feature. The old bark is beginning to just flake off. Now, just taking the wire brush, I'm going to gently scrub the bark of this tree to try and remove that old layer of bark. And there is also some dead roots at the bottom here that I can scrub away. At the very bottom of the tree, all this is dead, so I'm going to continue carrying the deadwood feature right to the base. Here I've got this little carving tool that I have found in a craft shop. I think it came in a set for maybe £1 or £2. And I find these are really useful in situations like this, where you really want to just carve out a lot of dead, rotting wood. In In bonsai, there's many different names for different types of deadwood features, like a Jin, Shari, or Uru, and they can enhance the tree's character. A Shari is simply the name we give to a barkless part of the trunk, and it usually either spirals around the trunk, but it can also be a little straight area like this one. So now I'm just taking this part of the trunk back. As you can see here, there's no live tissue behind that, so we can just keep enhancing the Shari. And you may think, is stripping off the bark like this not going to harm the tree? When this part of the tree is dead anyway, by removing it, we aren't really doing anything differently to the tree in terms of its health. All we're doing is just improving how it looks. All I want to do is expose the dead part back to where it is alive. If the part of it is dead, it will be brown and dark colored under the bark. But if it is alive, like here, as you can see, it has this nice green light color, and that is where I'm going to stop. Now that I have cleaned up the Shari and Deadwood feature, now I'm going to move up and bring my attention to this top part. And as you can see, this trunk of the tree, when it reaches here, it splits into two. And this gives us sort of a problem, and also sort of many different design options that we could go with. Personally, I'm not usually the biggest fan of the Y shape on a bonsai. I could make it work with this tree. One option is to keep both branches here and here and wire everything down into an overall triangular shape, and maybe that could work. Another option is to remove one of these branches. So for example, let me just take a black bag. So now with all that foliage in this bag, you can kind of see how this tree would look without that branch. If I did this, the tree could look kind of bare, and I would have to leave it for another 2 years to get all bushy the way it is here today again. The only reason I kept both of these branches in the Y shape and didn't remove them 2 years ago is because the tree's health could have suffered if I removed everything from it. That's why I kept both. One was more as a security. So let's take this off and put it onto this branch. This is how that one would look, and this one has got significantly more foliage, as you can see here. Let's put it back onto this turntable and think, where would the front of the tree be if I removed this branch? Of course, I want the front of the tree to show off the deadwood feature, so maybe this would be the front, and the tree would taper nicely from thick up into this branch. So that's another possible option. And then with this branch that's behind the bag, instead of chopping this off, I could turn this into a Jin and then even carry the Jin down into the Shari. That way the visual energy of the tree flows up in both directions. And this is one of the things that I really love about bonsai. There isn't one solution to every tree. This tree has many different design options I could go with, and I think this is where your own personal artistic vision comes in. I can't tell you how to do this to your tree. This is down to your own personal preference and taste, and really what aesthetics are to you. Before I fully make a decision on what I'm going to do with the design of this tree, I'm first going to clean up a little bit of the structure, remove some of the foliage that's further in on the tree. That way I can see a lot more of the branch structure of what's going on, and that will help me further make a decision. All I am doing when cleaning this tree is taking a branch like this one here and simply just removing the foliage that's on the inside of the tree. And because I know this species backbuds like crazy, I don't really mind removing it for now just to see the structure, and then later when it grows again, we will get more growth back in here. Here's another example of what I'm doing to clean up this tree. So any of these little just backbuds that's growing, you can pluck them off. By plucking them like this, there's always a chance it could tear the bark of the tree, and then you'd have a bigger problem. So I would just always recommend using some scissors. There's some branches in here we could cut back to that's starting to become a branch. I could cut this here and that would become the new leader. So any of these bigger branches like that, I'm going to keep in case I use them later. But just the really small ones that are beginning to grow, we don't really need them at this time. So I have now made a decision, and the branch that I have decided to create into a Jin is this small one right here. It doesn't really have that nice of a structure, and I did snap a branch up here, and I don't really see any future of the tree where both branches can work in harmony without me seeing that Y shape. Of course, if you like the Y shape, by all means keep that on your tree. Just personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the double trunk at the top, but I really do love the movement of this branch that we're keeping. It comes up and it twists and turns, and I think it looks really nice. I'm going to try a Jin here, and if it doesn't quite work, I may just remove this branch entirely. So to make a Jin, I'm going to start by taking some bonsai scissors and just make a ring around this branch the whole way around. And this is so that whenever we strip off the bark, we don't unintentionally drag it down the trunk of the tree by accident and make a tear in a place we don't want to tear. So we're just creating a stop point here. Then we're going to remove all the foliage off of the branch. You can do this just by cutting off these parts. You can keep some of the thicker branches to take the Jin into if you wish to. But I don't want the Jin on this tree to be that interesting. I want most of the interest to be on the design of the foliage long term. Let's just see how this looks by cutting it here. And this smells just delightful as I prune this. I wonder if I can take these, keep them, maybe boil them and make an essential oil from them. Oh, it's almost like citronella. Now we're going to take the Jin pliers, and this is exactly what the Jin pliers are for creating Jins. So I'm just going to start by crushing all the branches the whole way down, bit by bit. Don't be afraid to really just squeeze it, and you will see the branch here getting crushed. That is completely normal when making a Jin. I'm going to do this part here, then we can continue down the thicker part of the branch. And if you look at Jin pliers, most of them should have these little ridges or teeth on them. This is to give it some grip, so whenever you grab the Jin and just twist it like this, it should grab it and it will come off pretty easily. We can just pull that down the branch. By having a Deadwood feature here and one down here and this little piece of live foliage in between, it looks a little bit unharmonious or disconnected. So what I'm going to do now is just connect this Jin down into the Shari, and I think this will make the tree look a lot more harmonious with a clear line from the base of the tree up into this Deadwood. And then on the other side of the tree, almost like a yin and yang, we will have balance with the live vein doing the same thing. And before I go at cutting this with a grafting knife, I do want to sketch it out first with a little piece of chalk. That way we get a clear vision of what it's going to look like in the end. I'm just drawing a line here. Maybe I could have it flow more from that point. Maybe I will change my mind and do a little part here instead, taking it more up this way instead of across. This is why we use the chalk, because once you do something with a knife, you can't really undo it. So if you color in all the area you want to remove, this can also help see what's going on and what the Deadwood feature would look like when you connect them. And then on this side, around the back of the branch, I feel like maybe coming down this way would work into the Deadwood feature. So it will almost look like if this were a larger tree, it would look like this tree got struck by lightning. Half of it died, and then a side branch was allowed to become the next leader. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. So now I'm just taking my grafting knife and placing it just here. Then I'm going to roll it over the branch, and then I'm going to come down this way. And you don't really want to do any fast motions like cutting it down the branch as you go here, because you want each cut that you do to be extremely precise. So just take your time. I'm down, I'm putting a little light pressure with my thumb on top of this, coming down, guiding it with your other hand. And if you feel like it's going to go quickly, you're always better angling it into the piece you're removing. So if it slips, it goes that way and not into the piece you want to keep. So I'm going to do a little more. We're going to do the same thing, and this time we're holding it with our right hand and pushing with our left. So it's good practice also in using both your hands. A little bit of ambidextrous training. There's a little cut I made here I can remove. This isn't quite in line with the way I want to go. I want to come more down this way. And then just using the grafting knife to push the cut that we've made, it should be able to pop it under it like this. So it should come off pretty easily. Look at this. You can use the Jin pliers to help you in these difficult to reach areas. Then on the top. After creating this Deadwood feature, I've now decided to change my idea of where I think the front of this tree should be, because simply this side to me here is so much more interesting. I like the way that the branch moves out into this direction. I like how much deadwood is showing on this side. And I think if I were to have this deadwood feature here, I could have the foliage all come to this side of the tree, and we could have maybe the apex here slightly off center, and I think it could look quite nice. And it's totally okay to change your mind with bonsai as you go along. You could spend years deciding that one side of the tree is going to be the front, only to later find that there is a much better front on the other side. Just before I begin wiring, I feel like this branch back here is going to be a problem in the future, so I'm going to remove that. It was just growing way too close to this branch here, and when both of these branches get thicker and longer, they'll begin to pull a lot of sap in this area, and then the trunk will swell and we will get what's known as inverse taper. I don't want that, so I'm just dealing with that problem as it happens now. And now to begin wiring, I'm going to wire with what is known as the 2-branch principle, and this is simply wiring 2 branches together with 1 piece of wire. And this is just so that each branch is anchored to the other. That way you'll be able to manipulate the branches without them springing back. So here I am just taking some 4mm aluminium bonsai wire, measuring it along this branch to make sure I have enough here. Then I'm going to come down and around, up and over. So that is anchored here. And then with this other side, I'm going to come down around the trunk just so that it is really secure, and then down and up and over this branch. If you're new to wiring, take your time because you don't want to risk hurting the tree just trying to wire quickly. Just take your time with it. I'm just going to wire to there and stop. Because the branch is getting thinner, I'm going to switch down to a thinner piece of wire for the rest of this branch. You never want to use a wire on a branch that is too thick for the branch. I'm going to cut this here. And this is another reason why we cleaned the tree out earlier. It makes wiring so much easier. As you can see here where I haven't cleaned it out, it's getting a little tricky to wire, so I'm just going to cut some of these off. I would rather remove them than trap foliage under the wire that's going to die off anyway. And then here, as I get to the end of the branch, instead of trying to pull this around with my fingers like this and risk damaging the branch, just to get a little bit more control over the wire, you can grab the Jin pliers and just curl it around like that. That just makes that job a little bit easier. Then to finish off wiring the end of this branch, I'm going to take some 2.5mm bonsai wire. That's going to go to the end of there. And I don't really want to take it up the same branch that I have wired because that would be a waste of this side of the wire. Instead, why not take it to a branch that needs wired later and that is also around the same thickness. So maybe this one or this one back here. A good test to see whether or not the wire will hold the branch is if you take the wire, hold it maybe 4 or 5 centimeters from the end and push it against the branch. If the branch moves, then that's a good sign that it's going to hold the branch. However, if we take it further in to the thicker part of the tree, and I push it here, and the wire bends, then this wire is too thin to hold that part of the branch. And then when we wire, I'm actually just following the same path of the last piece of wire. They don't need to be tied together or anything as long as it just follows the same path. Now that these 2 branches have been wired, we can begin just giving it a little bit of a shape. And I know this one, I want to come down, see if we can get the first pad of the tree somewhere around this area. Bring it down a little more. I don't want the bend to be too drastic. We just want a little slight curve. If you feel the branch is too long, you could come in, prune it, or you could give the branch a little bit of a bend. This can also shorten it, but just personally for my taste, because I want ramification on this branch and more side shoots to grow, I am going to take the tip of this branch off. I can just cut this here with the wire cutters, and that will now encourage all these side shoots to grow into new branches. And then next year when we come back, we can refine this pad even further. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, but I know this joint here is a little bit fragile, so I'm just going to put my thumb here and support it and pull it down this way. That way I'm not putting any stress onto the joint there. And it's completely fine if it covers the deadwood. And again, with this same branch, I want to take the vigor a little bit out of the branch. So I'm going to cut it here. By cutting this off, again, it will encourage new side shoots to get longer and get taper on this branch with better ramification. This is growing straight up and I don't really see a future for it in the design of this pad. So I'm going to cut that off. The same here. So this part of the pad has been dealt with. Now I would like to deal with this part. And as you can see, I would really like this part to be nice and flat like this. So we're going to have to wire this into this position. As you can see, This type of cypress is really fragile. Even me just pulling this branch like that has caused a little tear. So you really have to be careful with how you bend these ones at the junctions. Because I've weakened that quite a bit, I'm going to cut this here. So let's see what we can do with this part. I think this is looking pretty nice as a pad. I would just like to twist this branch a little bit. I think even going more with the clip and grow route of this one could work well also. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the vigor out of this, cutting back to some fresh foliage. You never really want to leave any of the branches completely bare with absolutely no foliage on it at all. If you were to do this, there's a good chance that branch will die. So you always want to leave some green. In bonsai, most of the times the third branch is placed to the back of the tree. So here we have the first branch, second branch, and now the third branch back here. This is what I have kept to create some depth. And as you can see, this is at the back. And I say generally because not always is this the case, but aesthetically, I really like it when this happens. You got a third branch at the back. I think it makes the tree look quite interesting. Combined with this little one here, we can push these together and create a makeshift pad. This one is growing at the inside of a bend, so this one just can't be a part of the design. And I'm really not afraid to go harshly on this tree because whenever I first styled it, all I left was the foliage that's on this one pad. So I know it will recover no problem from this, especially now that it's been in this pot for 2 years. It's got lots of energy to recover. This one here is somewhat of a competing trunk line, and I feel like if I leave this here any longer, we will get that Y shape like we had further down in the trunk again. So I'm gonna cut that in here, deal with that problem now before it gets really bad. We've got a single leader, which I really like. Then now shaping this back pad, I want to encourage nice flat growth. And again, I'm being really careful around the joints of these branches. They are quite fragile in this particular species. Just a little bit at a time, and I'm bending from a little bit away from the elbow. I just want to encourage all of this to be nice and flat. So it's okay to just take the Jin pliers, pinch the wire, and then you can rotate the branch like this. And then once again, to push the growth in, I'm just cutting back pretty far to some green foliage. Leaving all this on that little branch here. I'm gonna push this in here. And now finally, the last thing to deal with is the apex. And there's a few different ways we can tackle dealing with this straight up part of the tree after we have nice pads down below. We could wire this, so going with the overall sort of curvy nature of the tree, we could curve the tree back this way and then allow one of these side branches to grow up and become the new leader. But I feel like that approach is what we would do if we wanted to keep developing the tree, growing different directions and taller and taller and taller. Another approach is just to do a trunk chop. I'm asking myself, do I like the straight up nature of it? And I kind of do. I don't really want that much of a twist. Maybe a little tiny twist like this maybe. Kind of like the idea of a little twist just to bring the trunk back that way. But I know for sure this tree is not going to be this tall, so we are going to do a little bit of a chop. We'll start here and then we may come down and bring it even lower. When doing a trunk chop, especially on the apex of a tree, it helps to do the cut at the back of the planting. That way, when you're looking at it from the front viewing angle, you don't see that scar. So I'm just taking more of this 4mm wire. I feel like that would hold this no problem. Yeah, that's definitely moving the branch. I'm gonna coil this way because of the way that I want to bend this branch. I want to bend it that way, so it will be tightening that way. Whatever way you want to bend the branch, that's the way you want to coil the wire. And then to anchor this bottom piece of the wire, I'm coming down around the trunk. I feel like as it is there, because I've wrapped a whole way around the trunk, I don't need to anchor it to the Deadwood feature. I could just cut it here. I know that will hold it no problem. Now let's give this a little bend. And whenever you bend branches like this, you don't want to go in with your fingers and push like this, because this can create quite a lot of pressure in the one area. Instead, what I like to do is grab the whole thing with my hand like this. That way, whenever I twist the branch, the pressure is distributed along the branch. I'm listening for cracking noises, any tearing sounds, and I don't seem to be having any of that, which is good. But we didn't go too far, so it's okay. Now that we've got the bend, I'm just going to reduce the height of the tree down to where I think it looks best. And that is all that I'm going to do to this tree for today. All that's left to do now is give this tree a water. And there you guys have it. On that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like on this video. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And please let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Perhaps there is something you would have done differently with this Goldcrest cypress. I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. If you would like to support me and the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. Or if you'd like to become a channel member, hit the join button. That way you'll get early access to new videos before they go out to everyone else, and you will get access to membership posts. If you'd like to keep up to date with all the things that I do off camera, please follow me on Instagram. It's @NotionBonsai, and you can see all the things that I do on there. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.